Welcome back, everybody. It's been a long while, but we're finally back with Season 3, Episode 2 of the SilmFilm Project script discussion. We've got a lot to do tonight. We have to kill a bunch of people, unfortunately. Some of whom will actually have names. So, yeah, there's that. So awesome. Hello, people out there who are watching live, and if you're watching this on YouTube in the future, feel free to like and share the videos if you like and want to share them. If you haven't yet, feel free to subscribe so that when these things happen, you'll know that they are indeed happening. So yeah, why don't we go over things we need to actually have happen in this episode?
Yes. So we leave off the last episode with the Noldor leaving Tyrion. We probably need to have some farewells in the beginning of this episode, and if not, we're going to flash back to them later. So we have to kind of make a decision on what we want to show in real time and what partings we want to bring up later in the story. The conversation between Uinen and Alway has to pretty much establish everything we need to know about Alway. So it has to be a good one. It can't just be about one topic. It really has to sum up who Alway is as a person before Feanor shows up.
And kills him.
Yeah, pretty much. But I mean, so that the audience is not just sympathetic towards him, but understands him, which Feanor obviously won't, so we have to get that out with Uinen. Also, to remind everyone who Uinen is, so that her scenes in the next episode will make sense. Then we, of course, have to have Feanor have a meeting with Alway that goes poorly, but not obviously disastrously. Like, they disagree, but it shouldn't be obvious from the discussion that they're going to kill each other in an hour. I think, like, the audience is obviously going to suspect that something bad's going to happen, but it shouldn't be a giveaway that there's no threats issued in that debate.
Okay.
Then, of course, Feanor has to decide to steal the ships, to take them by force. And we have to show him getting to that decision, because up until this point, he's been using the force of his will to convince everyone to go along with him. Like, in his entire life, he's just been doing his own thing. People tell him no, he says yes, and they're like, oh, okay, I guess we can do that anyway. So he's just been getting away with it. And this is the first time where he's the leader and he says, this is what we're going to do. And someone actually says no to him and stops him. And there's no recourse for him to talk himself out of it. Always not going to change his mind and let Feanor take the ships on for any reason, under any circumstances, not for any money kind of thing. So we kind of just have to show what Feanor does with that kind of roadblock and how he convinces his followers that they need to pull some swords out and go after some ships, which they do. And that escalates quickly because the Teleri don't just stand down. And well, I mean, it does. So then we have to show the Teleri make the decision to fight, because they weren't expecting this to end in bloodshed either. And they do pull out weapons, although they're poorly armed compared to the Noldor for close quarters. Most of the fight takes place in the harbor. So we'll have different stages of fighting on different ships. And then the arch across the harbor is going to be significant for the...
it's going to be an action set piece thing.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a significant part of the landscape for the...
yeah, I understand.
For the strategy of the battle. Like, it's going to matter. So yeah, we have to talk about it. The rest of the Noldor, who are not Feanor's fanatic followers, mostly Fingolfin's people, also show up and join the fight for their own reasons. Then we show that. We have some significant deaths. Then we have Finarfin's followers who don't join the fight because they show up too late. So they don't make the decision not to fight, just by the time they get there, the fighting's over. And the boats have already gone out to sea. And we will show some aftermath in the harbor. The climactic scene is Feanor on the first ship to escape, going under the arch, while Fingolfin stands on the arch looking down at him, and the rest of the Feanorian ships are following him out of the harbor.
Both of them covered in the blood of their enemies and friends.
Right. I mean, they're both bloody at this point, and yeah, things happened. But then Finarfin's people show up, and there is the grief of the Teleri over this devastation in their home.
Right.
And we will show that in this episode, as like the ending of it.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's pretty much a summary of what happens. I mean, I know that's a lot, but
yeah,
more or less in order.
Who do we feel like we're following the most closely in this?
I'm strongly inclined to say not Feanor, simply because this is where his madness starts becoming obvious. Like, as soon as the oath happened, well, no, as soon as his father died, he's ruled by madness, grief, fury, revenge. Like, he's not making logical decisions anymore.
I agree.
And so that should have been apparent with the whole oath. So he's not really a character whose viewpoint you want to look through anymore. You want to look at him, not through him.
Yeah, I agree.
Unfortunately, as far as characters who are actually on screen in all those significant scenes, he's pretty much the only one, other than Alway. So I would say the obvious alternative is Alway. Slightly problematic.
That has its own set of problems, because if we put the focus on Alway, now we need to give him people to talk to once Feanor is not in the conversation anymore. Exactly. Not to mention, as I brought up during the session, it kind of asks the viewers to care about the situation in a slightly different way, which may not necessarily be the look we're really going for.
Exactly. It's challenging to do it that way without it being a automatic grab for sympathy for the Teleri, like a blatant, like, you should feel bad about these Teleri, when what we really want to do is have the viewer naturally come to that conclusion without it being shoved down their throat that way. Which
should be relatively easy to do,
considering it's a massacre.
Right.
You always feel bad for the people getting massacred.
Yeah, they get destroyed, so that shouldn't be super difficult. The other option, so our options are kind of Feanor, Fingolfin, or Feanor's sons.
Yeah, Fingolfin would have been my first choice, except for the fact that he's not actually there during the decision to attack the ships. Right. So, or the debate with Alway. So he misses kind of two of the pivotal decision-making scenes. So he has his own important decision, but it's halfway through kind of thing.
Right, and he doesn't have a lot of agency in.
Right, he's reacting to things that have already played out. So given that, I would be more inclined to go with someone in Feanor's camp.
There's a problem with that as well, though. Because
I know
if our closing moment is Fingolfin on the arch looking down at Feanor and Feanor looking up at him, if our protagonist is not one of the two of them, then we're leaving our protagonist is not involved in that moment, which is not.
Yeah, so it's an issue, and I realize that for some storytelling, you don't necessarily have a single protagonist. You have like A plot, B plot, C plot, and there's a lead character you're following in each of those plot lines. So you could have the protagonist of the A plot be one character and be like, yeah, that's who we're technically following, but still have B plots and C plots with a main character that we're following through. So there's ways around all of this, but it's climactic scene is Feanor and Fingolfin's interaction, then one of them should be our main guy, which leans towards Fingolfin.
Right.
Ultimately, if we were going to pick one of the sons, it should be Maedhros, because he's the one who's going to break with his father soonest. So we do kind of need to set up his transition from gung-ho supporter to less gung-ho supporter.
Yeah.
And we have already established the friendship between Maedhros and Fingon. So if Maedhros is with his father and Fingon is with his father, that final scene between Feanor and Fingolfin could easily also point to a final scene between Maedhros and Fingon seeing each other from a distance and being like, oh, you.
So, and it's interesting because Dave Atlee, who's watching on the stream, commented saying, "What about following Maedhros? He'll be there for the key scenes, but not necessarily consumed by the madness," which was also my thoughts in this. Like, if we were going to choose a son of Feanor,
I mean,
he definitely seems like the rational choice there. Yeah,
he is my favorite son of Feanor. For a lot of reasons. I know it's really obvious, but
one of the least crazy.
He's the wisest of them.
Yes.
Not a good decision maker 100% of the time, but he has wisdom to him that kind of covers up some of his mistakes, and he's paid for some of his mistakes more severely than some of the other ones have. Not at this point, but in the future. Right.
Well, one thing that we could do is kind of do like an upper decks, lower decks thing again, which we've done before, and have the upper decks protagonist be Fingolfin and the lower decks protagonist be Maedhros, so that we're there
for both sides. Yeah,
for both sides of this. We would have to give Fingolfin something to do during the intervening time when Feanor is at Aqualande. There would have to be some kind of conversation, at least.
Well, he could say goodbye to his wife.
Yeah, but wouldn't he be doing that at Tyrion?
Well, is there a reason that Feanor's group gets to Aqualande first? Fingolfin's group could be taking a little longer saying their goodbyes. I mean, it could happen at the same time.
More of them, that's true. Okay, so we could do that and have Fingolfin leaving Tyrion as like making his final departure from Tyrion at the same time as Feanor concluding his conversation with Olwe.
Right. Like we could start paralleling their actions a little bit in that way.
Okay. All right.
And the other reason to bring up Fingolfin's wife is that the main reason she stays behind is that she's best friends with Finarfin's wife.
Right.
Who is Olwe's daughter. Erwin. And Erwin
feels to me like
is the one who's
going.
Erwin's the one who's going to have to grieve Olwe's death.
Yeah.
Like she's the one who has to most regret this. So if we can introduce her at the very beginning of the episode in some way, I mean, Finarfin can say goodbye to her, and she can say, "Of course, I can't possibly leave Valinor with you. Like, you know, I'm not an Noldor." I don't know. We can think about how we want to do it, but we can bring her in early on as well.
Well, I feel like the easiest way to solve that is to have Arwen and Fingolfin's wife. What's her name again?
Anare.
Anare. Yeah, have them there. Like have them see the kinslaying.
Yeah, and that was the question of when do these farewells happen, and it's possible that the wives can say, "Look, we're not going with you to Middle Earth, but we'll see you out of Valinor. Like, you know, we'll come on the road with you a little bit." Yeah. So I mean, we can
with the tradition that the Rohirrim will one day have
in the films.
In the film, yes. I'm sorry. Wow, that is that. What's happening?
No, it's very easy to do that.
Why would you? Anyway.
Why would I call you out like that? Because I'm mean, obviously.
No. Why would you let me get that far in saying that? It's not your fault.
Yeah, I didn't know what you were gonna say. But no, the idea that farewells aren't necessarily instantaneous.
I'm editing that part of
that just because someone's staying in Valinor doesn't mean they're staying in Tyrion. Like we can play with that a little bit if we want someone in a different place. And I think we do want Eowyn to be with Finarfin coming up at the end and therefore seeing everything. Like that's an easy way to get her there, is she's with her husband and her children.
Yeah. Right, and it's also an easy way to have an RA have a very good reason to not want to go.
Yeah, and we could have an RA even be considering going with them at first, and then change her mind after the Kinslaying, even though that's not technically what happens in the book. Like if we need her to have a decision show up on screen, we could have multiple conversations that way where she changes her mind.
Dave says Arwen was supposed to be jumping off the bridge at the charge of the host of Fingolfin and triggered Galadriel's guilt. I don't remember that specifically. I do remember that they weren't entirely certain what they wanted.
They went back and forth a bit, but they did get to that point.
Okay. All right.
Because there was going to be a swan dive, and that was going to be significant. That was supposed to be significant for Galadriel. So Galadriel and her brothers are actually with Fingolfin's host. So they're not with their parents. So yeah, they wanted Arwen to be there already.
Okay. So Arwen gets to Aqualande ahead of... I don't understand how that's even supposed to happen.
Well, the idea
I don't
was
understand how... I don't understand what Arwen would be doing on the bridge either.
Okay, so the idea was that she would go to Aqualande after the decision was made in Tyrion. So she knows that the Noldor have made this decision to go to Middle-earth, and she's not having any of it. And so she's basically saying goodbye to her husband and going to live with her father again. Like, she's done here. The Noldor maybe are taking a little time to pack up all their things, and she's not. She's just going to visit family down the street, So that might be how she beats the host there. But yeah, the implication was that she arrives in Aqualande before Fëanor. Okay. But in such a way that they don't want her to be a tattletale either, because that looks like she's setting up. It was very back and forth about how they handle that, and I haven't listened to it for a month, so I don't recall what they said exactly.
Yeah, I was listening to it in the car on the way back from Philadelphia. My wife was also listening to other things, so it's not conducive for good paying attention.
Remembering details. Yeah.
Dave says, I did have a thought after the fact, which was that she might go as an ambassador to say, hey, the Noldor are coming. Isn't the purpose of the ships supposed to ferry people across? Yeah.
We want to introduce always purpose in some way that's very clear to the audience. Yeah. And a conversation between Arwen and Olwe would be helpful for that. Uinen is also helpful with purpose, but she wouldn't know the details of the Noldor's rebellion. So she could introduce purpose, but she couldn't specifically say, hey, these ships are for elves and all that.
So my question is, how do we establish the reason why Olwe says no then?
Well, the main reason Olwe says no is he finds out that the Noldor are leaving without the permission of the Valar. That this is a rebellion. He was all about building ships so that there could be free traffic back and forth from kosher, Valar approved traffic.
Yeah. So if Aeon maybe in that fact.
Yeah, and that's where we have to figure out where her loyalties lie. Like, how sympathetic is she to the Noldor? How loyal is she to her husband? And what does she think about all of this? How Teleri is she, or how Noldo is she? And she obviously is very close to her family and was raised with the Teleri, so she has more sensibilities that way than Noldor do. But yeah, almost no matter how we portray her, it's going to look like she's betraying somebody or lying to somebody in that conversation. It's really hard to pull off.
Yeah. All right. Well, so I mean, maybe that comes out of that conversation then, because Olwe has to articulate his reasons before he says no to Fëanor.
I think we shouldn't know he's going to say no to Fëanor until after Fëanor's there. So he's going to articulate his reasons to Feanor, saying something along the lines of, how dare you demand these things of me? They're my ships. You need to ask for them. And secondly, what do the Valar have to say about this again? Oh, nothing? Huh, maybe you should talk to them first. Like, he can bring up those reasons and throw them in Feanor's face if he wants to make it clear what his point is. But he should do that when he says no, and we shouldn't know he's going to say no. It should possibly even look like the Feanor might get the Teleri to join the rebellion at first. Like, when Feanor says that's what he's going to do, the audience might think that's the direction this is going, that this is the spread of the rebellion, not the Kinslaying.
Okay. So, what we could... All right. Let's establish what we're doing as far as the... let's get started with our actual structure here.
Yes.
So, as far as the teaser itself goes, what are we doing in the frame in this episode? Because I know that was not discussed at all in the sessions.
Yeah, we were supposed to remember. So, okay, episode 1 frame was Estelle wants to leave, and Rivendell gets the news that Sauron has risen again.
Right.
Essentially. And he meets the Dunedain, the Halberd's kid, who's Hamilcar? Is that his name?
Yes. Yes.
Hamilcar. Yes. So yeah. So that's what all happened, and then so episode 1 ended with young Aragorn sneaking out of Rivendell, essentially without permission.
Yes.
So episode 2 should be Elladan and Elrohir go out into the wild to find young Aragorn and try to convince him to come back with them to Rivendell. Instead, he convinces them to tag along in his little adventure because he has no intention of going back. So there should be shades of Beleg and Turin with that.
Right.
Where Turin refuses to go back to Doriath and Beleg tags along with them instead with the outlaws.
Okay.
So it's kind of like that. I think it's possible that we were supposed to have a whole episode of Estelle's adventures in the wild by himself.
I think that they were supposed to be out there looking for him.
Right, and maybe they'll meet up again in episode 3. So the frame here is just them setting out to look for him and him having his adventures on his own. All right. The problem with the him on his own thing is, what do you do with that? Like, who's he talking to? What's happening? Like, we'd have to think about that a little bit. Whereas the Elladan Elrohir storyline is a little bit more clear.
Well, the good news is that there is a lot of stuff going on in the main story. So we don't need a ton of frame here.
True.
I think just the discovery that Estelle's missing, Elladan and Elrohir going out to look for him. Estelle kind of discovering that it's not so bad out here. Like, or at least he's not discovering it. He's getting the impression that it's not so bad out here.
That he can do this on his own.
Right. And so he has what it says here is maybe there's a storm that he weathers or something like that. He has some success out there. I think that if we close out the frame with Elrohir and Elladan getting, like, finding his trail, so that we establish that they're going to find him in the next episode,
and then start that the next episode. All right, that works.
Right.
Yes, I mean, he could be like hunting or something, finding food, shelter, like, doing the woodland survival thing.
Right. And there's enough there. I think that's successfully our teaser is frame. 4 minutes of that should be sufficient.
And I guess that the tie-in is that he's leaving his home behind, and the Noldor are leaving their home behind. Is that the
right? Well, it's not good, is it?
Well, we don't really want a Kinslaying in the frame, so
no. I mean, oh man, there's no tie-in unless something's got to die. Like, there's nothing there.
Well, no. I mean, the all-way Feanor discussion ends in essentially a stalemate. They both say no to each other.
Right.
And they both insist on their viewpoint, and there's no agreement. So Estelle is insisting he wants to stay, and the twins insisting he should go back. But
no. If he doesn't find them, if they don't find him in episode 2, which is what
we're supposed to do,
I think that's the most recent.
Okay.
Excuse me. The most recent iteration of this. Wait a minute. Wait, hang on. No, you have something following that. Estelle running away and having his first encounters with the world outside Rivendell. The twins are sent to find him and do so. He refuses to return, so they agree to accompany him. That kind of makes it seem like the Kinslaying is always fault. Because if he had agreed to help Feanor, none of this ever would have happened. Which is true.